Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.
The National Weather Service.
Welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Percy. This is your weather for April 16, 2016. You can follow us on www.arh.noaa.gov as well as on Facebook and Twitter. Starting off with tonight's hazards, we have a blowing snow advisory that remains in effect until 6 p.m. Sunday. That's for the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and they'll be through the Brooks Range passes. And look for your northeast winds 20 to 35 miles per hour with gusts to 50 miles per hour, and visibility is a half a mile or less. For the satellite, we have over the western Aleutians and central, we have a strong 972 millibar occluded low pressure system that's going to be approaching the western Aleutians. And you can see a strong southerly swath of moisture just streaming through the Gulf. Not the Gulf, but the Bering, and they'll continue to bring plenty of moisture to the Bering, as well as on the backside with this low pressure system on the western Aleutians. And then along the southeast, we have remains of a occluded low pressure system just southeast of the Kodiak region with a trailing occluded front that's falling apart along the northern coast and it's following through into the southeast panhandle. There is a weak low just south of Hattagwai with a warm front extending through that region, bringing in a swath of moisture there. Farther north through the Copper River Basin, pretty much mostly sunny skies, as well as the southwest, lower Kuskokwim Valley and the Bristol Bay region, as well as you extend it up into the east of the Seward Peninsula. Farther north, you have the high pressure sitting over the Arctic and Beaufort Sea. The easterly flow is bringing in moisture there and cooler air, so continued snow showers in this region here along the Brooks Range. So that'll continue through tomorrow. And then over the northern Bering, you have a northerly flow, so it's bringing low stratus, and you'll have continued scattered snow showers in this region as well. Today's weather, here's these weak troughs pushing through the Brooks Range, the Arctic coastal front, our coastal areas, and that's bringing this scattered snow showers and blowing snow issues, and that'll continue to move westward. And then the big system right here, this occluded low pressure system here, that just south of Shemya, that'll bring this strong gradient through the central Aleutians and the Bering, and that'll continue to bring a wintry mix, and that'll continue to move eastward. Over the southeast, here's that trailing occluded front that's falling apart. Not much with that, a little bit of high, low and mid-deck clouds with that. You have more precipitation over here in the southeast panhandle over the Dixon entrance region with that low pressure system, some light rain there. For tonight's forecast, this low pressure system will eventually move over the Shemya region, and then that trailing occluded front will continue the strong southeasterly gradient there, and a wintry mix will continue to move farther eastward into the Bering. And then you'll have the warm front extending just south of the central Aleutians there, coming into just southwest of Nikolsky and Dutch. Over the southeast and northern Gulf, a continued occluded front that's falling apart, onshore flow, so light rain throughout the southeast and northern coastal communities. A dry slot over the Anchorage Bowl. Farther north, that weak trough will continue to push through and now produce ongoing flurries there. And then through the Bering Strait, you have that weak trough pushing through and now produce scattered snow showers on down through the northern Bering. Sunday's forecast, that occluded low pressure system will continue to fill and sit there. So you have that trailing occluded front continue to fall apart then. Still have that strong gradient out ahead of it, and so you'll have the wintry mix right in that region in the central to northern bearing. Farther north, they continue to weak troughs pushing through, so you'll have scattered snow showers in that region. Over the Gulf, that low pressure system is sitting there, and so you'll have continued onshore flow and light rain. There will be a dry spot over the Anchorage Bowl extending up into the Alaska range, so look for possibility of isolated thunderstorms tomorrow. Monday's forecast, the cool low pressure system will continue to fall apart. Continued southeasterly winds there through the Alaska Peninsula into the Bristol Bay region. Wintry mix as you get farther close to the Seward Peninsula. And farther north, snow and blowing snow on flurries, I should say, through the Brooks Range and Alaska Arctic coastline there. And then along the southeast panhandle, high pressure with some light rain that should taper off in the afternoon. Along the northern coastline, some light rain onshore flow there, so that should diminish by the afternoon as well. The Anchorage Bowl and along the Alaska and Aleutian Range looks pretty nice. Temperatures. 1 p.m. today, southeast, you had 52 at Petersburg, 50 at Juneau, so pretty nice conditions, warm there. Over the Anchorage Bowl, all in the upper 40s there, 45 at Valdez, 50 at Talkeetna, Glen Allen at 48. Then along the Aleutian and Alaska Peninsula, pretty much all in the lower 40s, except 50 through at Klickinik and 51 at King Salmon. That's pretty warm. Farther north, cooler temperatures, again with that Arctic air that's pushing in here. You have 4 degrees there at Barrow, and going on down the line, Cape Lindsborg at 10. Lowest is 1 degree at AKwx Pass. And then as you get down to the Gamble region, you have 18 there. And then along the Aleutians, again, all in the southeasterly flow with this next system, plenty of warm air there. As you can see, the temperatures all in the lower 40s to mid 40s. The cooler temperatures are going to be still in the Pribs, 30 to 31, and the Adak and Atka, 39, 38 at Shemya, again with that strong southwesterly push in here. Tonight's low temperatures, coolest along the Arctic coastline, -1 at Tin City. Again, in Anchorage Bowl in the southwest, all in the lower 30s to mid 30s here. Along the eastern Kenai, 38 at Kodiak. Along the chain, all in the upper 30s, all the way out to Shemya, again with that flow. The southeast, all in the mid 30s to lower mid 40s there in the southeast panhandle. Tomorrow's high temperatures pretty much are going to be in the 50s there around the Copper River Basin and along the Alaska Range, again with that clearing, so that's why we went with some isolated thunderstorms, instability and heating. Along chain, all in the 40s there with that included low pressure system. Coolest along the Arctic coastline there, 1 degrees at Dead Horse. Southeast, all in the upper 40s to low 50s, 51 there at Klowak. Flying weather, marginal, the IFR conditions, again with that occluded system sitting from the central Aleutians out into the western Bering, and then through the northern Bering and the Bering Strait, as well as IFR to marginal VFR through the Arctic coastline. The southeast, onshore flow, marginal VFR conditions, as well as the eastern Kenai, Prince William, and down to Kodiak. Flying weather for the afternoon, again with that occluded system to push farther east, so the IFR and marginal VFR will push farther east as well. And the blowing snow issues up here will remain, so you have marginal to IFR conditions up there. Southeast panhandle, onshore flow, continued low weakening there, so you have some marginal IFR conditions there. Tomorrow's flying, you have MVFR to VFR of AKwx, Adigan marginal to VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill VFR. And then rainy VFR and some isolated thunderstorms along the mountain range. Windy VFR and isolated thunderstorms. Isabel VFR and isolated thunderstorms. Metasta VFR and isolated thunderstorms. Tonita VFR and isolated thunderstorms. Portage MVFR to VFR. Chillicook and White VFR to marginal VFR. And then tomorrow's freezing levels, again, a northerly flow, cooler temperatures, so you see the freezing level farther south, but it will start to move farther north with this strong southerly push, southeasterly push of the occluded low pressure system, so 2,000 to 6,000 feet for your freezing levels. Same as along the northern Gulf in the southwest, 2,000 feet freezing levels down at the surface here, but they're higher up here with the high pressure system ridge that's sitting over the British Columbia and the lower 48 region. Tomorrow's icing, you can see from 7 to 10,000, isolated to occasional moderate, again through the central, just east of Dutch, extending down into the central Bering, about 4,000 to the north, from 7 to 10,000 over the southeast panhandle. Tomorrow's jet stream, strong northwesterly flow, 145 to 150 knots. Then it goes down, digs down to the base of the long wave trough, and then it transitions to southerly strong 145. Again, all that southerly push there, no surprise, warmer temperatures over the southeast. Over the Alaska region and going over Kodiak, a northerly flow of 60 knots. And then over the Alaska Peninsula going into the northern Bering, a southerly jet of 90 knots. And then over Kamchatka into the eastern Siberian, you have a westerly flow becoming southerly. Tomorrow's 9,000 foot winds. This low pressure system southerly flow 25 to 30 knots through the chain and the Bering. The northeasterly 20 to 25 knots on the backside. Strongest south of the western Aleutians, 50 to 60 knots. Over the Gulf, weak low pressure system, 20 to 10 knots on the backside. And southeast, you're going a strong southerly push here, southeasterly 50, then transitions with a ridge of high pressure to westerly at 25. The Arctic is easterly at 25. 3,000 foot winds, again, that low pressure system, strong southerly push here, 30 to 35 knots, 40, you get the central Bering, north side 45 to 30. Strongest southwest of the chain, western Aleutians, I should say, 45 to 50. Over the Gulf, southerly push 20 to 30 knots, and then transitions with a high pressure ridge in this area, or the Yukon Valley, 10 to 15 knots. Over the Arctic, you have easterly 20 knots. Tomorrow's turbulence, you have below 4,000, that's going to be along the eastern Aleutians and extending to the Kuskokwim Delta and over to the Pribilos, so it's isolated to occasional moderate. And then near the Cape Lisburne to in the lower Chukchi Sea, they have below 4,000. And in the southeast panhandle, you have below 4,000. We'll be back with your marine forecast after this.
Welcome everybody to another segment here on weather. I'm glad you could join us. I have Carvin Scott here today. He is the Science and Operations Officer at the Anchorage Forecast Office. Thank you for joining us today, Carvin.
Thank you for inviting me, Jim.
Well, I wanted to bring you in today to talk about an interesting topic that not a lot of people talk about up here in Alaska, and not a lot of people know about in the lower 48 when they come to Alaska. It's severe weather in Alaska, and it's very interesting, and it does occur. And I wanted to start off, I guess, talking about the main culprit, the thunderstorm, which elicits a lot of these severe weather conditions. Can you tell us what a thunderstorm is?
Well, Jim, basically a thunderstorm is you have clouds, obviously, when you have air gets lifted up and essentially the moisture condenses into a cloud. But then you can have situations where things heat up extraordinarily from the bottom of from the lower portion of the atmosphere. It causes, much in the same way when you boil a pot of water on a stove, such that you get that convection, what we call convection. And in essence, that's what a thunderstorm is that you cause the atmosphere to be unstable, much like a pot of boiling water, and the air bubbles up into the upper atmosphere. And what happens is that the bottom of the cloud stays kind of as water droplets, and the upper portion of the cloud becomes ice encrusted, and you can cause this. What happens is we get charges in the cloud get what we call disassociated, and when they get disassociated, it makes the potential for lightning and thunderstorms. Okay,
and if folks up in the interior, I'm sure, are well aware of what thunderstorms are. Being in here in Anchorage, I've seen many thunderstorms develop up into the valley. And you see these big billowing clouds, these cumulonimbus clouds is what we like to call them. And they are pretty impressive, and they can create some severe weather, including lightning. And I guess my next question here is, and I get a lot of this from people asking me about lightning, do you have to have lightning in order to have thunder?
Well, that is a good question, because I've been asked that question a number of times also. And prerequisite for thunder is lightning. And what happens with lightning is that if you can imagine this superheated channel of air, it heats to approximately 30 to 40,000 degrees Celsius. And it instantaneously heats the air up, superheats the air, and it causes the air to expand out much like a rapidly expanding balloon, and it causes a shock wave. And the same sort of shock wave that gets created when a jet exceeds the speed of sound and causes that air to be pushed out and we hear the sonic boom. It's the same sort of thing that happens when you have thunder, is that shock wave gets generated and it vibrates back and forth as that channel cools and then kind of vibrates like a rubber band being strung out, and you tweak it. And that shock wave is what we hear is the rumble after the thunder. You get the initial blast, that shock wave, and then you hear the rumbling, which is kind of like the rubber band then being kind of coming back to rest.
So don't assume that if you're in your house and you hear a thunder that lightning is not occurring, because it's not, or it is occurring, and the lightning is maybe in the cloud or maybe not in your vantage point where you can see it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. In fact, a lot of people I've heard reference to, well, what kind of lightning is it? And really there's only one kind of lightning, except where the lightning discharges is really the only difference. You can have cloud-to-ground lightning, which is the one that people most often see, and because obviously it's striking something on the ground. You can certainly have cloud-to-air lightning. We can have cloud-to ionospheric lightning. It actually goes from the top of the cloud up into the ionosphere. It's been seen by the space shuttle and photographed from aloft. And you can have cloud-to-cloud lightning. And it's all the same principle. The same principles when you rub your feet in the wintertime and get that kind of charge, and you put your finger right to the doorknob and you discharge that lightning, or discharge that little static charge. It's the same principle.
I hate when that happens.
I do too.
You know, the rule of thumb that I always remember from being a young kid was the rule that you could figure out how far away the lightning actually struck the ground or was occurring. And I believe it was, you see the lightning flash and then you count the number of seconds until that shock wave or that sound reaches your ear, and then you divide it by 5, and then you get the miles, I guess, that lightning occurred from your point where you were at. So I always thought that was interesting, and I still use it today.
Well, I still use it too. That's going to say, because grew up. In fact, that's what fascinated me about weather, was initially as a small child, you know, watching thunderstorms and lightning and things like that. And that was one of the first rules of thumbs that I came up with, or actually, you know, read about. And I used to sit down and try to figure out how far the lightning was. And it's a good rule of thumb because it's really based on the speed of sound at sea level moving through the atmosphere. And it's a very sound principle.
What causes a thunderstorm? Can you give? I know that's a general question, but it just up in Alaska, especially, what would cause a thunderstorm up here?
Well, you know, we get a couple of kinds of thunderstorms up here, and the one probably people see most often is the kind we have here from about the May time frame till until early September. And what will happen is that we'll get a little bit of cold air aloft, and then we'll heat down below, and it causes the air to go unstable, much in the same thing we talked about heating the pot. And the source of the air has to be pretty much over the land, which kind of gets into one of the questions I don't want to really talk about yet, but about why we don't have so much severe weather here in Alaska. But most of the time what will happen is that you'll get what really helped the convection is having the mountains. And the mountains, the air will kind of pile up on the mountains and cause things to accelerate upward a little bit more. And that's why you tend to see a lot more convection here in Alaska along the Alaska Range or the Talkeetnas or even the Chugach, and not so much down here in the lower portion like the Anchorage Bowl.
Well, let's talk about why we don't have a lot of severe weather up here. I'm from Wisconsin, so I remember back in the day when I was in college and even in high school, storm chasing in my little Plymouth Horizon, chasing the storms down and you know, hopefully catching a glimpse of a tornado. Of course, now in my later years, I'm glad I never did get to see the tornado. But up here, there's not a lot of storm chasing going on because there just isn't a lot of severe weather, I guess. The frequency of severe weather up here just isn't as high as it is in the lower 48. Why is that?
Well, there's really two reasons, but primarily the reason is the cold water. And like I alluded to earlier, is that the main principle in convection or in any sort of thunderstorm activity is having warming at the base, or the Earth's surface, and having relatively much colder air aloft, somewhere in the upper portion of the atmosphere. And if everybody can kind of think back, the Bering Sea, the Gulf of Alaska, and certainly Cook Inlet, which is an extension of the Gulf of Alaska, provides chills that lower portion of the atmosphere and essentially causes the convection to be subdued and to be retarded. And so it is the times that we do seem to get a lot of convection in Alaska is when our source region is from the interior, from the Yukon, from the Northwest Territories, and where you don't have a lot of influence from the Bering Sea, Bristol Bay, or from the Gulf of Alaska. So it's that cooling in the lower portion of the atmosphere because of the cold ocean water. And it's the same thing that you don't have a lot of convection on the Pacific West Coast. And if you grow up along the Gulf Coast, which is where I did, where we have thunderstorm after thunderstorm from April until September, that because of that warm Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean around the Gulf Stream.
Welcome back to your Alaska weather. I'm meteorologist Perry Daney. Now starting off with the sea surface temperatures. Again, the cooler air coming, northerly flow. That's why the sea surface temperatures are cooler in the Bering as well as just south of the chain. Over in the southeast, a strong southerly push. Remember, we saw in the jet stream. That's why you have warmer temperatures over the southeast portion of the Panhandle and the eastern Gulf. Today's sea ice forecast continued. This is going to be ice pack is going to continue to move westward with the southeasterly winds, so 10 to 20 nautical miles in the next several days. Then along the Norton Sound area, extending down into the YK Delta's coastline, shoreline, you'll continue to have ice pack that will break away. Now for the Sunday's marine forecast for southeast, you're going to have southeasterly flow, southerly small craft, and then it transitions to northerly 20 as you get to Lynn Canal. The outside waters pretty much all southerly 20 knots, except for a small craft there getting near just north of Sitka. And then for Monday, inside waters are pretty much all southwesterly, southerly as you get to Lynn Canal, 15 knots there. The outside waters pretty light, 15 knots westerly to southerly as you get to Yakutat. And then for Sunday, along the northern Gulf and the Prince William Sound, as well as the northern Cook Inlet, light and variable winds, 10 knots, northeasterly flow, 15 knots along the eastern Kenai, southeasterly along Kodiak, and then northerly through the southern Cook Inlet, easterly there at the Brooks, southern Cook Inlet there, and then northeast down through Shelikof Strait. And then Monday's forecast, pretty much all southeasterly flow along the Kodiak, extending up to eastern Kenai, small craft winds there. Easterly flow at 10 to 20 knots in the northern and southern Cook Inlet. And then through the Barren Islands, southeasterly flow 25 knots, as well as easterly through the Shelikof region. And then Sunday for the Alaska Peninsula, pretty much southeasterly flow, Bristol Bay small craft, as well as just south of Kodiak. Then you have gale force winds there from Perryville down to Cape Starashef, both on the Bering and the Pacific side. Monday, continued southeasterly flow, except for easterly small craft through the Bristol Bay region. And then for the Aleutian chain for Sunday, southeasterly flow, small craft, except gale force there along the Dutch region. Then with this included low pressure system that's starting to move over into the Bering, that's why you're starting to see northwest flow from Shemya eastward. For Monday, light and variable again through the central Aleutians from Adak to Nikolsky, then southeasterly from near Dutch. Westerly again from Shemya to Adak. And then Sunday for the west coast, northeasterly flow through the northern Bering, and then YK Delta and the Bristol Bay region easterly to southeasterly. A little stronger from the St. Matthew down to the Pribilofs, gale force winds southeast and easterly, and freezing spray issues along the northern Bering there, as well as just north of Nunavik Island. Monday's forecast, easterly flow, small craft northeast through the northern Bering, and freezing spray there near Gamble region, or the northern Bering. Sunday marine forecast for Arctic, easterly to the northeasterly along the Arctic coastline, and then transition to pretty much all northeast, small craft, and diminishes to 15 knots going through the strait. For Monday, our coastline pretty much small craft winds easterly along the Arctic coastline, and then northeast as you go along the northwest coastline. Tonight's forecast, again, the strong occluded low pressure system will be sitting over the Shemya region, the occluded front extending through the central Bering down through the central Aleutians. So your strong southeasterly flow gradient here, a wintry mix, and then along the Alaska Peninsula, you have this occluded low that's starting to fall apart in the northern Gulf here. And so that's going to bring onshore flow pretty much along the Alaska Peninsula into the eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, as well as the southeastern Panhandle. And that'll be light rain. Farther north, you have that weak trough that's pushing through the Arctic coastline, and that'll bring light snow showers and then the blowing snow issues through the Brooks range passes. And then the lower Chukchi and then the northern Bering Strait, you have those scattered snow showers with that weak trough pushing through. Sunday's forecast, this occluded low pressure system sitting just north in western Bering. The occluded low front will start falling apart. Still have that tight gradient here southeast through the eastern Bering, extending into the northern Bering there. So wintry mix will continue there. On the backside, the cooler air will start filtering in along the western Aleutians. So you'll have a wintry mix as well. Then along the northern coast, you have that weak low pressure system with a trough extending through into the Yukon Territory, onshore flow, so light rain throughout the eastern Kenai, northern coastal communities, and the southeast Panhandle. And then the Copper River Basin and Alaska Range right here, you'll dry spot tomorrow, so heating and increased instability with the sun helping to heat things up, so chance for isolated thunderstorms. And then the southwest, continued light flow there. You'll have some light rain. Wintry mix as you get farther along the YK Delta. Farther north, you have that weak trough pushing through, so continued blowing snow along the Brooks Range and Arctic Range with that and some light fog along the Arctic coastline. Then for Monday's forecast, the occluded low will continue to fill, and a weak trough, a weak occluded system extending through the Bering in the southeast Panhandle, southeast Aleutians. And that's the wintry mix as you go farther north into Bering. And then over the southeast Panhandle, and continue onshore flow with some light rain. You guys have a good...
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.